I welcome you to worship. I'm glad that you're here this morning. Last week, I shared with you my core beliefs, which is something that I do every new year, which included a belief in God, a belief in love, Jesus Christ, the church, the Bible, the transforming power of prayer, forgiveness, marriage and family life, free will, and eternal life. And I challenged you last Sunday to think about your own beliefs. What are your core beliefs? What are your priorities in life? Are you building a house that is on solid rock? And so I hope that you have been doing that as you begin the new year. I remind you of Harvard theologian Harvey Cox's 3 eras of Christianity that he put out in his book a few years ago. The first is the age of faith, from Jesus' time all the way up until the conversion of the Emperor Constantine, where the early church was committed to following the example of Jesus Christ. Then from Constantine all the way until the middle of the 20th century, he says we were in the age of belief, where creeds mattered, and memorizing scripture and correct dogma was a big deal. But then Cox said, somewhere in the middle of the 20th century, we moved into the age of the Spirit. And in the age of the Spirit, beliefs and doctrine and creeds and dogma do not matter if your faith does not transform you, if your belief in God is not something that you experience on a regular basis. Because here's the deal. Beliefs are important, but they don't matter if they don't change your life. And they don't matter if you don't put them into action. And so today, we're starting a new series on the book of James, titled Faith in Action. And I invite you, and I'm serious about this, I invite you and challenge you to read and study the letter of James as we go through this series. It'll last about a month. James is a short epistle in the New Testament. And although there has been lots of scholarly debate over the author of the letter and also the timing of the letter, most people agree that it was written by James, the brother of Jesus, or the half-brother of Jesus, sometime around the middle of the first century, 49 or 50 AD. It's a very practical book of the Bible that focuses on what it means to live the Christian life. And here's some of the themes that we'll find in the book of James. Overcoming trials and tribulations. Do you have any of those? Not treating people differently based on what they have or don't have. Putting your faith into action. Taming the tongue. Watching what you say and how you say it. Not giving in to the ways of the world. Living life one day at a time. Understanding the root source of conflict in our lives and being patient in suffering. Those are some of the themes that we'll find throughout the letter of James. And I think that this epistle is incredibly practical. You don't need a commentary or a preacher to help you understand it. You can read it on your own, and it will speak to you. And so if you want to know how you can put your faith into practice, then I challenge you to read the letter of James. Throughout history, there have been many who didn't like this epistle. In fact, there were some that didn't want it to be included in the New Testament canon. Perhaps the most famous of them was Martin Luther, who called the book of James the epistle of straw, I think were his words. He did not think it was evangelical enough. He didn't want it in the New Testament. Some believe that it stood in direct contrast to the Apostle Paul's teaching that we are saved by grace through faith, because James says in chapter 2 that faith without works is dead. But here's the deal, according to Stauffer anyway, you need both. You need faith, and a genuine faith will lead to good works. It's not one or the other. This epistle is a moral exhortation of how to live the Christian life. James is more theocentric than it is Christocentric, which is why some people have a problem with it. But James is a phenomenal letter. It's uncompromising in its demand for clear rejection of the world. It has a consistent commitment to understanding reality as measured by God. It is one of the most ecumenical letters of the New Testament. And it's a letter that is grounded in social ethics that results in a call to action. Faith is not just something that you have, faith is also something that you do. And today we begin with chapter 1, where James says, whenever you face trials of any kind, consider it nothing but joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. In other words, the hardships and the struggles that you go through in your life will make you who you are, even if it feels like you're not going to get through it. I graduated from seminary in May of 2005, and I moved back from Princeton to Memphis, Tennessee for two reasons. One was to work at my home church, to work with my father. The other reason was to be closer to my mom. And some of you have heard me tell this story before. My mom was very sick. She was very depressed, and I wanted to go back and see what I could do to help her. My parents were divorced at the time, which was difficult. I graduated on May the 14th. I got ordained on May the 22nd. I started my job on June the 1st. And then 3 months later, on September the 2nd, my mom committed suicide. That was how I started my ministry. And at that point in my life, I had a decision to make. I could give up on the church and the ministry. I could go back to law school, could get a PhD in some field, or I could remain a minister and help people deal with similar tragedies and hardships. And ultimately, that's what I chose. I went into the ministry, and I stayed in the ministry because I want to help people. Life is difficult. Life is hard. Life beats you up. It brings you surprises that wear you out and tear you down. As I was writing this sermon on Thursday, I was texting with a few people, a couple in our church whose son had emergency brain surgery this week to remove a tumor. Texting with a church member who lost her brother on Christmas Eve. Texting with somebody in our church who is battling stage 4 cancer. Texting with my brother-in-law in Philadelphia who had Drano spray up into both of his eyes, and now he can't see well out of either one of them. Life is difficult, and James knew this. And so he said, whenever you face trials and temptations, consider it nothing but joy. We all need endurance. We all need support. We all need help along the way. And thankfully, we don't have to go through life alone. We're called to help each other. We're called to live together in community. I mentioned Harold Kushner's new book last week called 9 Essential Things I've Learned About Life. But in that book, he has a chapter that's titled, To Feel Better About Yourself, Go Find Somebody to Help. He says that's the Bible's prescription for finding your way out of despair. Find someone that you can take by the hand and guide to a better place. And you'll not only help that person, but you'll help yourself. You'll make yourself feel stronger by reaching out to somebody else. Helping others on a regular basis is how we put our faith into action. Secondly, this morning, if we continue further into chapter 1, James talks about trials and temptation. He says God does not do the tempting. One is tempted by one's own desires, and that desire gives birth to sin. What are the things that tempt us in life? We know the things that tempt us in life. I like the humorous story about the guy who called his doctor and he said, "Doctor, tell me, will I live to be 100 years old?" And the doctor said, "Well, let me ask you a couple of questions." He said, "Do you drink?" And the guy said, "No, I don't drink." He said, "Do you smoke?" "I don't smoke." "Do you gamble?" "No, I don't gamble." "Do you chase women?" "No, I don't chase women." The doctor said, "Well, tell me, man, why do you want to live to be 100 years old?" There's all kinds of things in life that tempt us, and there's all kinds of things that, if done in moderation, not the chasing women part, if done in moderation, can be okay. When it comes to the subject of temptation, I've always reflected upon Gandhi's 7 blunders. Do you remember what those are? I think they're profound. They've been etched into human history as something that all of us and our society in general deals with. You know, Gandhi was the one that said, I would have been a Christian if it weren't for all the Christians and the way that they behaved. And so Gandhi talked about the 7 blunders, and he said that here are the things that I see as being a problem in the world. First, wealth without work. This could be defined as getting something for nothing. Think of Wall Street scandals, Ponzi schemes, shady business deals, people that are able bodies, but they want to work the system. Ours seems to be a get-rich-fast culture. Did you see the Powerball's up to $900 million? That's exciting, right? People wanting to do the bare minimum and wanting to reap the rewards, but not work hard to pay the price. The second blunder, Gandhi said, is pleasure without conscience. It's a culture that's obsessed with sex and sexuality. And more children are now born out of wedlock, which often leads to other problems in our world. Many people say if it feels good, then you do it. Worry about the consequences later. Educational problems. And we got a lot of people in our church that are committed to helping work to solve the public education problems that are present in our culture, but they're committed to it. But there's only so much the teachers can do if they don't have support from the families, and I think everybody would agree with that. Pleasure without conscience. Doing things for the sake of the moment that will have greater repercussions later. Third blunder, knowledge without character. I don't care how smart you are. If you don't have character, then what do you have? There is an abundance of knowledge, but is there any wisdom? Bernard of Clairvaux once said, there are those who seek knowledge for the sake of knowledge. That's called curiosity. There are those who seek knowledge to be known by others. That's called vanity. There are those who seek knowledge in order to serve. That's called love. Are we growing and loving others while we are learning? Are we doing anything with our knowledge? Blunder number 4, commerce without morality. How are your employees treated? Are they paid fairly? Are they shown respect and dignity? Is it possible to succeed in business and remain ethical and treat people fairly? I think it is. I know lots of people that do it well. Jesus said, what good does it do you to gain the whole world but forfeit your life? There's more to life than chasing the almighty dollar. Blunder 5, science without humanity. The technological advances in the medical world are astounding. It becomes tempting for humans to think that they can play God, but science should strengthen our faith. Blunder 6, worship without sacrifice. As our culture becomes more individualized, the concept of sacrificing to help other people sometimes seems like a foreign concept. Many choose to worship the mirror. David Brooks says in his book, The Road to Character, over the past several decades, we have built a moral ecology around the big me, around the belief in a golden figure inside, and this has led to a rise in narcissism and self-aggrandizement. Jesus taught, deny self. How popular is that? Blunder 7, lastly, politics without principle. What are we willing to stand for and speak up for? What issues really matter? Do moderates still have a place at the table, or have they been drowned out by the extremes on both sides? When will we quit fighting and compromise and work together? Gandhi offered this prayer. He said, I offer you peace. I offer you love. I offer you friendship. I see your beauty. I hear your need. I feel your feeling. My wisdom flows from the highest source. I salute the source that's in you. Let us work together for unity and love. I invite you to reflect upon those 7 blunders that continue to stand the test of time and history. Lastly, this morning, further in chapter 1, James says, "Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. For your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. Be doers of the word and not merely hearers who deceive themselves." Do you guys like Ben Carson? I don't mean do you like Ben Carson's politics. I mean, do you like Ben Carson? I'll tell you one thing that impresses me about Ben Carson, totally apart from his politics. He is cool, calm, and collected. At least that's how he appears. He doesn't get rattled. He doesn't seem to get angry. He holds it together. And I don't know about you, but I sometimes envy people that can always stay cool, calm, and collected in the face of the turbulence of life. James talks about anger because Jesus talked about anger. Anger is a human emotion that we all have to deal with. And some deal with it better than others. I've preached a lot of sermons on anger over the years because the Bible talks about it a lot. And because we all experience it on a regular basis. Every human being deals with anger. Some more than others. But anger affects our mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Doctors will tell you that anger leads to high blood pressure and stress and inability to focus and relax. It also leads to heart attacks and strokes and cancer, headaches, stomach aches, rapid heart rate, shaking, dizziness. Emotionally, we get sad, depressed, guilty, resentful, anxious. Anger has also been known to make people sarcastic, to take away their sense of humor, causes them to raise their voice, drives them to drink or smoke excessively. The question is not, will we experience anger? We all experience anger. The question is, how do we deal with anger? A few years ago, I came across this list, and I thought it was interesting. It was called 10 Powerful Ways for Dealing with Anger. And it said, first, when you're angry, say nothing for a while. Just be quiet. Second, try to be indifferent to those who wish to make you angry. Third, use reason to stop your anger. Fourth, look kindly upon others. Learn to cut them some slack. Fifth, value peace more than anger. Sixth, always try to understand those who are critical and don't just try to defend yourself. 7, focus on something different. 8, breathe deeply. 9, meditate, reflect, and pray. And 10, smile, even when you don't feel like it. Henry Nouwen is a great spiritual author. He passed away, I believe it was like 1996, but he has a number of great books out there, and if you're looking for a spiritual book, I would recommend just about any of Nouwen's books. But in his devotional book called Bread for the Journey, where he has a different devotional for every day of the year, he says, how do we befriend our inner enemies, lust and anger? Listen to what they're saying. They say, I have some unfulfilled needs, and who really loves me? Who really cares about me? Instead of pushing our lust and our anger away as unwelcome guests, we can recognize that our anxious, driven hearts need some healing. Our restlessness calls for us to look for the true inner rest where lust and anger can be converted into a deeper way of loving. There's a lot of unruly energy in lust and anger. when that energy can be directed towards loving well, then we can transform not only ourselves, but even those who might otherwise become the victims of our anger. It takes patience, but it's possible, Nouwen says. Richard Rohr talks about the opposite of being centered in his book, Everything Belongs. He says the most obvious indication of non-centered or non-spiritual people is that they are, frankly, difficult to deal with. Every one of their ego boundaries must be defended, negotiated, or worshiped. Their reputation, their needs, their nation, their security, their brand of faith. Ego becomes a big problem. Life revolves around them. Everything has to be their way. Those who are always at odds with other people have something going on inside of their own hearts. James concludes chapter 1 by saying this: if any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this: to care for the orphans and the widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. I look forward to this journey through the book of James, and I hope you'll join me over the next few weeks. Amen.